Something big is going down in Israel. Now, if you've been seeing some of these news headlines pop up here and there, there is a lot to be concerned about. Hundreds of thousands of protesters on the streets, some of it not looking so peaceful. President Biden is not concerned that Israel will deteriorate to a civil war. And this is coming from the National Security Council spokesman John Kirby. But of course, you and I are probably going to start asking the question of why is President Biden explicitly saying that there won't be a civil war unless there was concern out there that Israel might devolve into a civil war. In fact, when we start listening to Netanyahu over in Israel, we start hearing him speaking of a civil war. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't think that Joe Biden's track record is the greatest out there. Just the fact that he has to say that he's not concerned about civil war is kind of scary. Secondly, is he really the most with it person to read the tea leaves, so to speak? I mean, sniffing hair and being creepy, yes. Nuance and current events, maybe not so much. We can't help but think back to the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. When he was asked, is the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan inevitable? And he said, no, it is not. And they said, why? Could you explain that? He says, but I trust the capacity of the Afghan military, who is better trained, better equipped, and more competent in terms of conducting war. There is going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of the embassy in Afghanistan. You're right. They were lifted off the ground on the outside of airplanes at the airport. So maybe let's not listen to what President Biden says. Let's look at what's happening on the ground there. Let's listen to the people that are actually involved in the process and who have some idea what's going on and can discuss things more at length other than ice cream. So what is happening? Israel has a problem. They have just elected a very conservative parliament, basically. Their Knesset has been taken over basically by religious and like politically conservative groups, but yet they have very liberal activist judges. They're blocking them at every turn. So these liberal activist judges are acting like little mini dictators who are basically saying, we're not elected by people, but we can just keep blocking everything that you're doing. So what's happening is the parliament and the prime minister and everything like that over in Israel, they're basically trying to enact some judicial reform where the judges are being held to account for their basically unlimited power. And many people are out there rioting as a result of this. Netanyahu, due to a lot of the rioting and stuff, Netanyahu actually fired the defense minister, which just it took things to 11 out there. He said this, though. The premier says he has repeatedly called for dialogue on the overhaul plan and says there must not be civil war, saying that there is a severe crisis in Israeli society. When there's an option to avoid civil war through dialogue, I take a time out for dialogue. He says, adding that out of national responsibility, he is delaying the final readings of a divisive judicial appointments bill, under which the coalition would take almost complete of their appointment of all Israelis judges until the next Knesset session a month from now. So they put the bill on pause after just this wide-scale rioting. There's large-scale strikes that have shut down much of Israel. Soldiers are refusing their orders. Embassy staff abroad are refusing to work. The U.S. embassy, the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. has shut down. for the foreseeable future because the staff is refusing to work. Netanyahu's own home security perimeter was penetrated by protesters. They broke through whether they were allowed to pass by security personnel or what happened, were they invited inside, sort of like, an event in Washington, D.C. Anyway, they were allowed to penetrate in, and of course this freaked out. Now, he was not present at the residence at the time, but obviously that's like a breach of the White House, okay? That's not how things are supposed to go. So he has suspended the judicial reforms, but he has appointed a new defense minister and has called for a forming of a new National Guard. So if you're hearing all this, does that sound like there's nothing going on over there? That's clearly not. Now, some of you are already putting this into your understanding of what happens in the book of Revelation. Israel, of course, is a central focus of the prophecies of what is to come. You are already kind of seeing, very hypersensitive about what's happening in Israel. For those of you who are not quite so religiously minded or you don't believe in any of that, let me point this out, that Israel has been basically considered United States' most reliable ally in the Middle East. One of the most reliable allies alongside the UK. And we have provided a tremendous amount of joint training, joint resources, and the United States pumps a lot of defense spending into Israel due to the historic partnership. So a destabilization of Israel is very serious. Also, whenever you have a leader that is being destabilized internally, the most obvious and most tried and true way for him to consolidate power is to suddenly have an enemy from the outside. And Israel definitely has some enemies on the outside, both internally, inside their national borders. They have an enemy outside, the Palestinians and such. They have the Syrians with Hezbollah and Lebanon, where they could do airstrikes, which they continue to do airstrikes there. And then, of course, there's Iran out there. That's a big, bad boogeyman that they have been seriously considering attacking in the not far past, because of the enrichment of uranium, the protection of the alleged work towards a nuclear weapon. There's all that taken into consideration. So this destabilization internally could result in a large-scale outside confrontation, or the weakness within could prompt an external enemy to see if they can kind of capitalize on that and attack Israel from the outside. Or Israel can just literally tear itself apart because there are the liberals and the conservatives, which is different than the United States liberals and conservatives, okay? So don't project too much of the United States political situation or even European political situation, whatever your experience is. Don't project too much because it's always a little bit different wherever you go. There is definitely a different religious component to conservatives in Israel and a temple focus for some of this kind of stuff. Some of the people that have been appointed inside this Israeli government are very focused on rebuilding a temple. And that's obviously got a whole bunch of implications that go along with that too. So for those of you who are concerned about biblical prophecies, this is big news. And for those of you who are just focusing on this from a democracy and stability in the Middle East perspective, this is also really big news. We're watching closely what's happening in Israel. I'll keep you updated on what's going on there, but be advised that this is something you should probably be watching if you're concerned at all about what's happening on the global stage. Will this affect the United States proper? in the short term, maybe not, but this is definitely going to start shifting things out there. Israel's relationship with Russia, Israel's relationship with China, Israel's relationship with the oil powers over in the Middle East is very significant, and they are definitely a pivotal country that everybody kind of has a relationship with, whether for good or for bad. And they are definitely a domino that if it starts to fall, will definitely have an impact on the whole region as well as much of the world. All right, folks, if you found this video to be useful or helpful, you might want to check out another video from me right over here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you later. This is Steve Poplar from the Poplar Report saying see ya.